a person that I know that always asks, how is the world going to change? And I always tell this person, my friend, it's going to change one heart at a time. Because God created us noble, and He created us with a purpose to know Him and to worship Him. True worship, according to the Baha'i beliefs, is service. These classes, they're all connected. The children's classes give the children the spiritual foundation to understand that we're all a part of this world, and that our purpose is to contribute to make the world a better place.
Who feels like somebody just lift their hand up if they feel like they can make a difference in the world?
And then the junior youth group helps the children to see the power of meaningful service. Not just service where you're kind of trying to check off a list and see how many hours you can get in, but truly assessing the needs of our community and the world around us and trying to see how we fit into that.
One man can change the world. Exactly.
And then we have these devotional gatherings that change the devotional character of the people that come, because we all have a heart that can be touched by beautiful words. And I think that when our hearts are transformed by these beautiful words, it empowers us and it makes us want to go out and do even more. And then we have these study circles where we have a chance to actually really study and think about who we are and why it's important to do these things.
We call her Miss Danita. Meeting her, we became friends. She invited my son to the children's class. So I initially started dropping him off, and she asked me to stay for a study circle. And I did, and I found it really interesting. My background being a Christian, sometimes people are pretty fearful to try different avenues, but I learned that it was basically what I believed in. I enjoyed the study circle. We went from one book to the next, and the next thing I know, I found myself teaching the children class, which I really enjoy because I enjoy sharing the knowledge. My oldest son, Isaiah, to this day, he still is involved with it, where he actually teaches the youth class for Miss Anita. Surprisingly, my young son has Down syndrome, special needs. It's just surprising to see how much he's learned, how much he's picked up on.
Isaiah, you can come in.
It has taught my youngest son to tell me when I'm yelling at my oldest son, enough, Mom. Stop yelling at my brother, enough. And I'll say, Ishmael, you're right. You're right. Less yelling, more love. To be honest, I can sum it up in one word. Since I've been involved, I have more peace in my life. I do. I have more peace in my life. As a whole, it makes us all feel as though that our family has been expanded.
Welcome to Bahai.chat, a conversation series dedicated to our interconnectedness. It's an uplifting moment when we can turn our thoughts to spiritual ideas, each session rooted in the Baha'i Writings and the fundamental teachings of the oneness of God, religion, and humanity, led by individuals who are putting these principles into action. We're live streaming today's conversation on Facebook. You can find the link for that live stream in the chat box at the bottom of your Zoom view, and you can share it right now by clicking on the link provided. It'll take you to our Facebook page. Simply select share. Baha'is believe that we are living in the great day of God, foretold by each of God's previous messengers who have established the major world religions. All of these divine educators are connected. Their message is progressive, always leading mankind forward to new levels of unity. Each has been the bearer of a preordained message, essential for the times. God's latest manifestation, the founder of the Baha'i faith, is Baha'u'llah. That's an Arabic title meaning the glory of God. Baha'u'llah appeared in Iran in the middle of the 19th century, bringing an unprecedented volume of teachings with the overarching essential mission of the unification of the entire human race, a reality promised in the scriptures associated with each of God's former prophets. Now, there's no doubt that we're living in very trying times, times of growing friction and disunity. Times foretold, though, in the Holy Scriptures of all faith traditions, times that would precede the ultimate gathering together of mankind. Now, the old systems of the world seem now perhaps more than ever to be literally unraveling before our very eyes. Time-honored institutions are crumbling, evidently incapable of providing relief to billions who are suffering in every corner of the world. Referring to the messengers of God as having each been the source of God's healing remedy through the ages, Baha'u'llah writes this: the prophets of God should be regarded as physicians whose task is to foster the well-being of the world and its people, that through the spirit of oneness, they may heal the sickness of a divided humanity. But the needs of mankind have evolved through the ages, and this is the reason that God has revealed his teachings progressively, every 500 to 1,000 years, through a succession of divine messengers or educators, prophets of God. Referring to the needs of the times we're living in and to the authority of his own revelation, Baha'u'llah writes this: the all-knowing physician hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. The remedy the world needeth in its present-day afflictions can never be the same as that which a subsequent age may require. Be anxiously concerned, he tells us, with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. The Baha'i faith, the youngest of the independent world religions, is moving forward now. One single, unified, global faith, devoid of division, free of denominations. It is quietly, perhaps even imperceptibly, moving forward, uniting people from every nation, territory, race, and ethnicity, soul by soul, community by community. It's moving forward now under the loving guidance of its uniquely elected institutions operating at local, national, and international levels, the blueprints for which have been established by Baha'u'llah himself, a first in religious history, in crystal clear, unmistakable terms. For decades now, in thousands of communities around the world, Baha'is and their friends, many from other faith traditions, have been serving one another in processes and programs grounded in the vast, transformative writings of Baha'u'llah, learning how to work together, bridging the great divides that have for so long plagued mankind, bringing hearts together and building more unified communities on an ever-widening basis. So let's have some fun now and explore one such story of community building. Today we're going to meet the Hardin family from Woodbridge, Virginia. In many ways, the Hardins are a typical family, though perhaps a bit larger than most. They laugh together, sing together, pray together. They're dedicated to finding ways to contribute to the betterment of their community through individual and collective acts of service, working together in an array of activities with their friends and neighbors. The matriarch of the family is Danita Hardin. Service has always been an essential part of Danita's life, and as her family has continued to grow and grow and grow, as she likes to say, she has striven to ensure that each member of the family, from her youngest daughter to her mother, a frequent visitor, have opportunities to demonstrate their love for Baha'u'llah and his teachings through action. Whether the Hardins are hosting devotional gatherings or inviting children in the neighborhood to join them for their children's class or holding youth activities, for the Hardins, service and family time are inseparable. It's my pleasure now to introduce Danita Hardin, who will share with us the concept of community building and how that finds expression in their family's work. Danita, welcome to the chat.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks for that lovely introduction, and so happy to be here to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts, reflections, and stories about how my family has worked alongside our neighbors and friends to begin this work of building bonds of love, friendship, and community as envisioned by Baha'u'llah, who, as you mentioned, is the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith and whose teachings include the elimination of all forms of prejudice, the equality of men and women, universal education, and the oneness of mankind, really so that all might have an equal opportunity to contribute their talents towards the advancement of civilization. But before we share personal experiences, I really like to just share a little bit about what this community building process is and what some of the unique features of it are and why it was so attractive to me. Many times when we think about community building, we think about social events. We think about things that happen from time to time. Maybe we gather for some food or some activities. And while these events may have elements of fun and excitement and even may have brought people together momentarily, there's no pattern established that fosters stronger relationships, unity of vision, thought, or action. Consciousness of the community's real needs doesn't necessarily increase, and certainly transformation on individual and collective life within the community is not central to building community purely through these social means. One of my favorite quotes from the Baha'i Writings is, "The betterment of the world can be accomplished through pure and goodly deeds, through commendable and seemly conduct," which is really one of the foundational concepts of this community building process. And this quote is so simple, yet really so profound. It really reminds us that the only qualification that we need to begin to change the world are pure desire, pure intentions, and an unwavering effort to transform both our individual and collective lives. And it helps us to kind of put things into perspective, that God is really not so much concerned with how much we have, but he's concerned more with how willing we are to share what we have, whether it's our time or talents for the betterment of mankind. And while the community building process that my family and I are involved in does have some social aspects, it's really spiritual in its nature and at its core. This pattern of community life is emerging in neighborhoods and even villages all across the world, where Baha'is and their friends and family members, as David mentioned earlier, are engaged in a community building process that seeks to cultivate a spirit of love and to translate that love into action. And as you could see in the video, in this model of community life, prayer, spiritual conversation, and service to others really go hand in hand. And each of these core community building activities, which include neighborhood classes, and study groups for children, preteens, teens, and adults, as well as spaces for collective worship, aim to foster inner transformation and to create wider and wider circles of participation and inclusion. And this is really a revolutionary idea. In these spaces, there are spiritual themes that are explored and applied to our daily lives. This pattern of learning how to pray, how to study, how to act and reflect together with other members of the community really seeks to break down some of these long-standing barriers that have really prevented us from working together. In time, really what happens is that the neighbors cultivate a sense of collective ownership. They all begin to feel like they're a part of this collective enterprise where they they're all thinking about the spiritual, the social, and the economic well-being of their own community. And members of the community are really seen as protagonists instead of passive participants. And by eliminating some of these barriers that have prevented us, some from making their full contribution, we really all benefit. In fact, there are a couple of excerpts from a message from the Universal House of Justice, which is the elected governing body of the worldwide Baha'i community, that really help us to consider the implications and importance of building community in this way. And one of these quotes says that community building is an expression of our belief in humanity's oneness. So it's one thing for us to have a belief, but if it's not being expressed, it really remains just kind of a conceptual idea. The welfare of any segment of humanity is inextricably bound up with the welfare of the whole. Humanity's collective life suffers when any one group thinks of its own well-being in isolation from that of its neighbors. And then there's another quote also given to us from the Universal House of Justice, where it simply says, "We urge you to see in each person a potential protagonist in the community building process, and to consider how conditions may be created that would enable many to walk this path together." So these are our thoughts that probably all of us have been thinking, right? How can more of us serve together, work together? I mean, it's really no secret that that we're going through a challenging time, and the world's challenges have really reached a level that's made it clear that we're inextricably linked. We're facing challenges that impact all. Our communities are facing challenges that impact every member of the community. And we really no longer have the luxury of working in isolation. And it's also no secret that in order for solutions to these challenges to emerge, that many must arise to serve selflessly. Not just Baha'is, but any and all who are committed to reshaping society around principles such as love and reciprocity. So really, the thought of a process where all can contribute was very attractive to me. Service has always been a huge part of my life. And I strongly believe that justice, true justice, requires universal participation. So in 2007, when another Baha'i friend of mine invited me to study a couple of books with her, it really ended up being life-changing. Later, I realized that the series of books, which are part of this community building process, seek to assist all to develop the capacity to serve. And one of these books was about teaching Baha'i children's classes, which I had just studied actually before that video was made in the beginning segment. And shortly after that, started my first children's class. And you got to hear a little bit about, or see a little bit of what emerged as a result of that children's class. We were able then to help some of the parents to also study these books and become children's class teachers themselves. We started collective spaces for worship where people of all races, cultures, backgrounds, and religions could come together and begin to pray. We started a junior youth group, which is a group for preteens, where they learn how to see themselves as noble beings and express themselves with eloquence and act out their love for their community and their love for God through acts of service. And I'll just say in full disclosure that there were a lot of lessons that were learned in these initial steps of serving the community. In fact, right after I started my first children's class, I realized that I didn't tell any of the families that this was supposed to be an ongoing and weekly class. So for the second class, absolutely no one showed up. So there was a lot of learning from the very beginning. And this was 13 years ago. And since then, both my involvement in this process has grown, and also my family has grown quite a bit. I went from having 3 children to now having 11 children through both adoption and fostering. And as I studied and served more, I started to really think more about how I could accompany my own children to be protagonists in this spiritual enterprise. After all, if this path is open to all, certainly my children should be offered the opportunity to share their gifts and talents as well. So I thought about how they could become my collaborators and my co-workers. And this really dramatically changed the way our family functioned. We began to pray together more. We began to study and make plans as a family. My children would go out with me to meet our neighbors, to discuss spiritual themes, and to invite them to activities. And it really became clear to me through this new way that our family began to function that children, preteens, and youth can find great joy through service. And I know right now we really live in a society that has tried to convince us that we should think of our lives in a very fragmented way, that very dichotomous way of thinking about our lives. Time for work, time for family, time for fun have to be very separate things. But we've really become more unified and live a much more coherent and integrated life because we've placed service really at the center of our lives. And really my hope is that someone who's listening, who's really been thinking about serving and how they could serve their community, maybe thought they were too busy or were struggling with what they would do to balance the idea of service and family time, will hear about how my relatively large family sees service really as a coherent part of their daily lives, and not as something that we have to make extra time for, but really as an integral part of our friendships, our work, our family life. And we'll decide to take those initial steps to begin to serve.
What a wonderful, wonderful story. And you have such a brood of children. Let me just see if I can get this right. There is 7-year-old Jasmine, 9-year-old Aaliyah, 11-year-old Aisha, 12-year-old twins, Caden and Edward, 13-year-old Natalie, 17-year-old Anika and 17-year-old Marbelli, 20-year-old Jalil, 23-year-old David, and 26-year-old Jamal. Did I get that right?
You got it right, David. Okay. I have one going into 2nd grade and one going into his third year of law school. So you got it right.
That's amazing. And several of your children are here with us today. So let's bring them on. And Danita, please introduce them to us. Hey, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey. Hey.
Yeah, so it's actually fitting that I have 7 of the 11 on 7/11. Today is the 11th. So as I say hi to you guys, maybe you can just wave so everyone knows who you are. I'll start with the youngest. There's Jasmine right there in the middle, who is 7 years old, and we have Aaliyah, who is 9, and Aisha, who is 11 years old, heading into middle school. We have, I'll say them in order because actually they are 1 minute apart. So I will say the youngest one first, Caden, who is 12 years old, and Edward, who is also 12, but just 1 minute older. Natalie, who is 13, and Marbelli, who is 17 years old. And we were laughing a little bit the other day because we realized that this upcoming year we might have 5 different graduations to go to. We have Aaliyah, who will be finishing elementary school. We have Natalie, who will be finishing middle school. We have Marbelli, who will be finishing high school. we have David, who's my 23-year-old, who will be finishing up with his undergrad degree, and then my son Jamal, who will be completing his law degree, all in the same year. So we are praying, crossing our fingers that all of these things won't be happening on the same day. So one of the things that we do, all of them are involved in some way in these community building activities. Some are hosting devotional gatherings and involved in the children's classes and junior youth groups that we've mentioned. Marbelli is serving as a children's class teacher and has really helped many of her friends even to begin children's class. But one of the things that happens really in all of these groups is that we have opportunities to sing beautiful songs together that really help us to think about these qualities that we need to reflect in order to be of service to our community. So guys, would you be willing to share a song for us today?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna put myself on mute and I'll let you guys go for it.
So we're going to sing Strive, and Jasmine's going to lead us.
Strive at your actions day by day may be beautiful prayers. Turn towards God and seek always to do that which is right and noble. Enrich the poor, raise the fallen, shelter the sorrowful, bring healing to the sick, reassure the faithful, rescue the oppressed, bring hope to the hopeless, shelter the destitute.
Love it. I'm sure we don't have many people on camera, but I'm sure that they're all loving it and applauding. You guys are great. Thank you so much, really, for sharing that. And if I'm correct, Jasmine, Aisha, and Marbelli, you're going to be sticking around for the Q&A we're going to have a little bit later, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
that's great. So we can't wait for that to happen. And let's invite now folks that are watching. If you have questions, write them in the Q&A. You can direct them to individuals or to the group. So we'll see you guys in a few minutes. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Danita, we have another very special guest with us today. I was really amazed when you shared the story about your connections, not connection, but connections with Justyce over the years. And we simply had to invite her to join us today so you guys could share that story. So, Justyce, welcome to the chat.
Hello. Thank you.
It's great to have you. You guys tell us your story.
So this is really the closest thing to a miraculous relationship that I've ever experienced, aside, of course, from all the wonderful souls that live here in my house with me. Justyce was actually my student in 3rd grade. And she was from California, had come to Virginia just for 1 year. And that 1 year, she happened to be in my class. And I remember still, actually, the first day of school, her dad walking her right up to me and saying, this is my daughter. Please take special care of her. And I assured him that he shouldn't worry, that I would treat her just as if she were my own daughter. And from there, the relationship began. I could just see, honestly, like from the very beginning, that there was something so special about Justyce, and that this was a person that somehow we were going to continue to be connected. The next year, as teachers do, we look into the hall and we look for our former students to come down and come and wave to us. And unfortunately, I didn't see Justyce. So I wasn't sure actually what had happened. but I continued to pray for her really almost every single night. I just felt like there was just something about her for 10 years. And one day, I was going to run some errands, and I saw this new store that, honestly, I don't know what in the world made me go in there, because I would have never gone in a store like this. And I happened to walk in, and I said, well, I'm in here. I don't want to feel bad and not purchase something. So I think I found some little trinket or another to buy. And as I was going through the line, I looked at the person who was ringing me up, and I said, Justyce Asana-san. And she looked at me and she said, Miss Hardin? Is that you? And I said, it's me. And she said, and you remember me? I said, I do 100% remember you. You have no idea that I've been praying for you really for 10 whole years. And I'm so excited to have an opportunity to see you again. So I gave her my number, and she contacted me, and immediately she shared with me that she really had, a joy for service and enjoyed working with young people. So I shared with her a little bit about these community building activities that I'm sure she was still trying to figure out a little bit what I was talking about. But she trusted me enough that she came along with me to a study of some of these books, book 1 and book 5, which help us to really think about this adolescent age group and how we can bring out the best in them. So I don't know, maybe Justyce, you can share a little bit about what your initial thoughts were when your former teacher was like, hey, can you meet me at, for coffee so we can talk about, the service. And yeah.
So when we had initially exchanged numbers, you had talked a little bit about the Baha'i faith and how much it meant to you. And that just kind of got me excited about it, because I didn't know anything about the Baha'i faith at that time. So when we initially met for coffee, we went through book 1, and I remember going through certain lessons and being like, this really speaks to my heart. I really want to know more about this. And then I had the opportunity to serve with you, which was one of the most amazing things that could have ever happened in my life, because I've learned so much, not only about myself, but I had the opportunity to help other children and junior youth learn so much about themselves and help them with the lessons in their life. So it was just an amazing, amazing experience.
Yeah. So once we got together, I'm sure like for a while, she probably was like, oh my gosh, every time I answer the phone, this lady is like asking me to come to some new activity or start something in the neighborhood or community with her. But she was so loving and so willing to learn. And like Justyce said, I think we both learned so much from each other. I think we learned a lot of patience. We learned how to love each other even more. And really, through this process of serving together, I really feel like Justyce is my daughter. When she calls, she says, hey, Mom. And, when she asks about my children, she says, hey, how are my sisters and brothers? So I really feel like, not only did I gain someone that I could serve alongside, but I gained really another member of my family. So it really is amazing. And one thing that I have seen in so many relationships is that when these relationships are built on spiritual things, that there's something very strong about them. And these are things that are not fleeting and that don't come and go. Like if it had been a relationship based on our favorite sports team or something, maybe once the team started to lose, the relationship would have faded a little bit. But because this relationship was really founded from the very beginning of it on spiritual things, on service together, it really has just grown and continued to grow. And now, she's moved now to a different city, so we can't serve as much together as we'd like, but certainly we call each other regularly. We still pray together, still talk about ideas and opportunities to serve. So So yeah, it's just been wonderful.
It's been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and just, you know, so many surprises that God has for us that you know, we just don't expect. Like I said, I knew that there was something great about Justyce, but had no idea that, you know, 10 years later, she and I would be working in the neighborhood and community together, really learning about this process.
So the quote of Baha'u'llah that justice is the best beloved of all things in my sight, justice turn not away therefrom. I guess it has an added measure of significance for you.
That's right. That's right.
That's great. Where are you living now, Justyce?
I am actually in DC.
Oh, you are? Well, then
Yes.
not that far away.
No, not too far.
Not too far.
Okay. Well, we've got a few questions coming in, and why don't we bring the children back on, and let's see, we will have Jasmine, Aisha, and Marbelli join us, and let's take a few questions. If others want to write in while we're getting started here, write in the Q&A box. You'll be able to do that. I have a question here, and I think you sort of addressed it, but you are raising 11 children and doing all of these amazing activities. How do you balance it all? What's your secret? How do you do that?
Well, I'll share both the spiritual part of it and the practical part of how it works. So, you know, obviously a lot of prayer and some of the things that I've shared, which is that really, thank God, my children love to serve. My children love these activities. And we don't feel like our lives are fragmented. We don't feel like we have to choose whether we're going to spend a little time together or whether we're going to have a devotional gathering, a prayer gathering, because we really find so much joy in the prayer gathering that really that becomes our family time together. So really, by seeing our lives in this way, in this whole way, as opposed to seeing it in all these tiny parts, it really gives us the ability to do so many things and to serve in so many ways, and also to be together as a family. And then on a practical level, thank God some of the older kids do have driver's licenses and things like that. So when there are places that kids need to go, that I am able to call one of the older sons and say, hey, could you drop someone off or could you pick someone up? But really, we really do support each other. We really do feel so much like this community work, like this is our family's life. It's not like a thing that we do. It is the way that we live. It's a part of our lives. So even as we're driving to and from the activities, we're praying and we're singing and we're enjoying the time that we have together. So yeah, I think that it doesn't feel like it's you know, a bunch of balls having to be juggled and balanced. It just really feels like just so natural and organic that a family would spend a good portion of its time, you know, praying together, studying together, learning together, serving together. And that's exactly what we do.
And I've heard that in these community building core activities, you talked about devotionals, children's classes, study circles, that your family alone, I mean, you're doing an amazing number of activities in the community. How many activities? And tell us a little bit about that.
So right now we are participating in and supporting more than 30 activities. We actually are working in several neighborhoods right now. Some of them are hosted by us, really from the youngest member of the family on up. For example, Edward, who's one of the twins, decided a few weeks ago that he wanted to have his own devotional space where we would go walking in the neighborhood and we would pray together while we walked. And so we started, and And so every couple of weeks, we get together and we walk and we share prayers and we share songs while we're going around the neighborhood. And then also we've had an opportunity really to accompany and share this joy with others, and they've also had an opportunity to find joy through service. So my daughter Marbelli, for example, who has lots of experience teaching children's classes, has also helped many of her friends now to study this material and see the benefits of really being role models and mentors to the younger members of the community. So they've also studied this material and become children's classes as well. And then Jasmine, I just want to share this story. It's so funny because I think we're involved in so many of these activities that Jasmine assumes when she was younger, especially, that anyone that was coming to our house was probably coming for an activity or for prayer or for something. So I remember one time, I heard a ding dong at the door, and I think one of my older children had opened the door, and I could hear Jasmine inviting someone in. And when I looked, I realized that it was the UPS guy that she was telling, come on in. Are you here for prayers? Are you here to study? Do you want a prayer book? And I'm sure he, thought it was very sweet, but was completely confused as to why, he was being invited in to pray.
That's a great story. And you talked a little bit in your initial presentation. I think you mentioned Marbelli. Actually, you are or have done led children's classes, and I'm wondering, talk about the children being protagonists as well. Marbelli, would you like to tell us a little bit about that? And maybe your sisters would like to talk a little bit about their involvement. Would be great.
I started teaching, working with kids 4 years ago. And at first I was unsure because I didn't know how to work with kids, but I love kids, younger ones. So when my mom asked me what group would you like to work better with, the older ones or the younger ones? So I was like, the youngest one. And as I've been working with different kids, I can see the change, and the class is really helping them. And the stories that we do, they're really paying attention, and they want to come every week. So for example, during quarantine, when nobody was able to go outside and we couldn't have meetings or anything, the moms will be calling our home, and they'll be asking, the kids wanted to know when we're meeting again and stuff. So we weren't able to meet, but we will go to their house, and we will drop bags of crayons, prayers, coloring sheets, and stories, so they can feel they're still doing something for the class. But I really love working with them. They're interesting and they're fun.
Well, it's so great to hear that story, really. I'm wondering if either of your sisters would like to share some thoughts.
It's been good. It feels like when we get together, it just feels like we have a much bigger family because we sing songs, say stories, and pray.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, here's a question for the kids. What have you found to be some of the best ways to tell your friends about the Baha'i faith and these activities?
Give them a flyer about it.
How do they respond? Do they like it?
Yes.
This one is for you, Danita. How has the pandemic affected your community building activities? Are you doing some stuff online? I think Marbelli spoke to that briefly, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there have obviously been some challenges as we initially had to scale back on our personal interactions with these families and friends that we were used to seeing really every day. And so it did take a couple of weeks for us to just really try to think of a new pattern and new strategies, and to be creative in our ways of maintaining our connections with all of these friends and families that we had that we'd engaged in this process. And so, as Marbelli said, we did do home visits where we, of course, wore masks and gloves and stepped 6 feet away from the door. And, sometimes the parents had to hold the kids back because they were so happy. They, their instinct would be to run and hug, and we'd be like, no, not now. Sorry, you can't give us hugs. We love you so much, and we'll blow you kisses. But unfortunately, right now, we have to stay a little further away from each other physically, but not spiritually. And of course, thank goodness for technology, because of course we were able to hold, our children's classes, junior youth groups, and even study circles and devotional gatherings via Zoom, where we, still regularly came together and prayed. In fact, we were able to even start new activities, which I was really wondering how we would be able to do this, but it actually ended up that many people who maybe had a little bit of challenge with maybe travel or time and things like that actually found that this was a much easier way to interact with this material. And so during this time, we actually were able to start several new activities, even during the pandemic. And I know the girls, talking about ways that they reach out to their friends. I know they were a little hesitant to share, all of the means that we use, and certainly we do share flyers and things like that with friends, but also through conversations and through just loving friendships. In school, when school was still in session, I know a lot of the kids would invite their friends to the activities and things like that we have, share with them about the Baha'i faith. And also, I was really impressed with Aisha. Sometimes you don't realize how much your kids are even listening. You're saying these things, and I remember hearing her talking about how she had described a celebration that we were going to go to one of her classmates that she wanted to invite. And I was like, oh, wow. like that's exactly it. The Baha'i faith is a world religion whose purpose is to unite all people. And that is exactly who the Bab is. And so it was just so exciting to hear her be able to articulate that. And then also, I think one of the things, the great things that especially young people have at their disposal is the use of social media. A lot of, my older daughters and their friends who are teenagers and youth, they are always sharing quotes and prayers and videos of the things that we're doing, with their friends via Snapchat and Instagram. And friends are, commenting like, where are you guys that you're sitting around and praying together? what kind of group is this? What's happening? And how can I be a part of it? So
I have a question here for you, Justyce. What have you learned from the study circles that you've been engaged in that you've been able to now sort of carry into your new life in Washington, D.C.?
That's a good question. There's always an opportunity for service. I think that's the biggest thing. So I'm always looking for an opportunity to serve, even if it's not to the capacity that I was serving before. So one of the situations is just recently, a couple of children in my neighborhood, we live in a bit of a food desert, right? So what I ended up doing is actually connecting with a farmer and getting them more fresh fruits and vegetables for their families to eat. Because although food was available to them, that we realized that there are many fruits and vegetables that they didn't have access to. So what I did was make sure that they had some kind of access to that, and even put their parents in contact with that farmer. And they were able to come to some kind of agreement with that. And if I'm not mistaken, this building I'm living in kind of adopted that policy and also put that into helping feed the kids. So yeah.
You told me a conversation we had yesterday that you grew up in the Baptist church.
Yes.
And then in today's comments, you mentioned that, you know, when you began sort of looking at the study material, it really resonated for you.
Yeah.
You know, what particularly resonated for you?
Many things. But again, just to go back to service, I really like the opportunity to serve. I think it's a really big thing because it's not just looking inside yourself and the things that you need to do to be a good person. It's helping others realize the potential that they have in them. And so it's not that you are just progressing, but everybody's progressing and we're progressing together. And I think that's a really big thing.
Well, I think you have, in a way, just answered the next question that we have here. And just observing all of you, I think, is the answer, but maybe it needs to be articulated. This is an anonymous question. Please help me understand the difference between a passive participant and a protagonist.
Does anybody want to go ahead and answer that? Or should I start?
Do you want to go for it?
I think being passive is recognizing that certain things are true. So recognizing that there needs to be an opportunity to serve and taking steps to do so, and then actually doing it. A lot of people believe that to be of service, there has to be this grand thing, like you truly have to do junior youth groups and children's classes and all those, although those things are great, sometimes it's just as easy as providing snacks for those junior youth and children classes and making sure that they have enough books and everybody has rides. So I think that's the difference between being passive and protagonist, if I'm not, that was a word that you used.
Any added thoughts, Danita?
Yeah, I mean, I think that really when I think about passivity, I think about sidelines. I think about maybe people who are on the benches and maybe they're cheering people on and saying, you know, way to go. I think that's great what you guys are doing. But I think that really to be a protagonist, really those of us who have studied some literature, we know that protagonists really take action, right? They're at the forefront. They're taking the lead and not just sitting around and saying, you know, that this really needs to happen, or even saying good job for making it happen, but they're actually in the process of making things happen. And I think that this is just really such an important principle when it comes to transforming our inner and outer surroundings, really, because for so long, many people by choice or by force have been relegated to the sidelines. And this is a process where all are not just encouraged to contribute their talents and gifts, but really we're saying that we can't do this without you. This is not a process, a congregational process where there's someone at the front leading and all the rest of us sit and cheer. This is a process that requires all of us to place our talents and gifts in a position where all get to have a chance to benefit from them. And what other way can we do that but through action?
And I think we can see the impact of that in the faces of virtually everyone that you've brought with you today. And we are so delighted really to have had this time to share with you and with your family. Danita and Justyce, thank you so much for joining us as well. Next Saturday, we will have another community building activity look. We'll visit with Mark and Ozzie Perry from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Mark and Ozzie have been focused on working with youth for well over a decade now. So you have a chance to come and meet the Perrys and some of the amazing young people whose lives that have been touched and who are in their own right engaged protagonists in service to the community. Again, thank you so much to the Hardins and to Justyce, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. We hope to see you next week as well.